Bonjour à toutes et à tous, je suis François Langlais, TF1 RTL.
Hello everyone, I'm François Langlais. I work for TF1, French TV, and RTL, which is a French radio. This last session is called Paroles d'Espoir, Words of Hope, and I will be moderating it with the coordination of Françoise Benamou, who is the president of the Cercle des Économistes, and she is the one who's going to introduce the discussion. Françoise, over to you. Thank you very much, and hello, François. Hello, everyone. I would like to mention an article in Esprit, a magazine, in 2023, where the philosopher Zandé Teresa-Janji talks about the slogan of Iranian women, women, life, liberty, which is a cry for the end of totalitarianism. She says, hope has taken over from distress and enables us to reconcile ourselves with the progress of liberty and history. So let me pay tribute to the fight of Iranian women and everyone in the world who's fighting for freedom and democracy. All along our encounters, we have talked about hope, we have talked about the issues and problems. First of all, economically, we underscored the resilience of our economy. When you talk about France, unemployment is being reduced, inflation as well, industrialization seems to be back. But economic resilience is not equal to societal resilience, and we've had upheavals, extremely violent upheavals. So now the idea is to go from a society of violence and resentment to a society that is making headway. Let me get back to 4 topics that have been uppermost during the rencontre. First of all, technology and innovation. When faced with the development of AI, and we oscillate, we balance between fascination and worry. It's like Aesop used to say, the poison and the remedy. Progress in health, in research, and in defense come at a time where people are becoming aware of the fact that AI is not a danger but has to be regulated, and we've seen this increasing awareness even in American technology. So we have to take into account these progress and make headway. Second point, research can benefit from exchanges amongst researchers throughout the world, but the world is more and more fragmented. I've heard several times that Europe has become a peripheral continent, but nevertheless, in view of the war, our continent has reacted in the right way despite our disagreements. I mentioned the people's rising. Our democracies are being challenged in our Western world. Democracy is a fight. We will win it. This is the first fight. Third point, we talked a lot about climate and at least environment during these rencontres, and it's an obvious point. When faced with anxiety and disorders, 3 elements give us hope. First of all, the awareness, and this is obvious, the increasing awareness every day with a change in our modes of living, with a desire to get away from waste. Secondly, the ability to adapt when faced with the brutal shocks and the increase in energy, and knowing that we're capable of a lot of resilience. So there's hope even on the side of climate, even despite this heat, hope is there. And then the last point, hope is also something that is present in the neighborhoods. Very often, all too often see these neighborhoods in their more somber aspect, but we want to answer it with 3 words: school, school, and school. Education. Education to train, education to increase the skills. We need that, it has been said, but also education to remind people of the values of the Republic. Education, but we must also build an economy with free time for the youngsters so that they have jobs, but they have time, which is not an empty time, but a time that will give them moments to take these side paths. So we have several speakers here with us, 3 here and a 4th who is remote. Thank you, Françoise, for presenting these words of hope. 3 young speakers, as you said. First of all, Victor Storchan, who is a specialist in AI, which is an expertise at the limit between technology and finance. He's going to decode this word. With him, we have Ava Jamshidi, an international reporter in Elle. She has covered areas in the planet where there's a lot of problems of hope. And we also have Melati Vishsen, who is a young activist in climate. Unfortunately, she could not be here, but she's on the screen and she's following our discussions, and we'll come back to her. And next to me, Fatih Benjilali, who is the former breakdance world champion, and he will tell us about the hope as he sees it in his daily commitment and in French cities and neighborhoods. They will all have 4 to 5 minutes, and then there'll be a discussion here on stage and with you. Françoise will conclude, and to finish, we have prepared a surprise for you. Victor, let me start with you. As Françoise said, the new technologies, and this is nothing new, it has always been the case. We've always had fears, whether rational or irrational. For you, when contemplating the future, can you tell us how we can see some sprouts, some hope sprouting behind all these fears? Thank you, François. If you look at history, in the history of AI, all the greatest experts have made wrong predictions, like Jeff Hilton, who said in 2015 that we would not have to train radiologists by 2050, as the machines would do it for them. So let's remain extremely humble as far as our predictions are concerned. The productivity gains from AI in the 20th and beginning of the 21st century were mainly directed at mass consumption, with technological progress which was mainly biased towards the most competent people and in terms of computer and IT. In the 21st century, we will be able to understand how we can use AI for sustainable consumption in order to aim at sustainability. There have been extremely interesting studies that have shown that the use of ChatGPT, for example, could help the weaker people have more competitivity gains. We've looked at doctors, at all kinds of professions, and we see that the weakest can increase their productivity, and this is most interesting. As Françoise said earlier, if we want to turn the result of this academic research into something practical over the long term, we have to work at social level to help introduce this in the industry, and obviously we must work on political alliances and a global governance. Very quickly, 3 points concerning a possible approach. First of all, let's deconstruct the speech of exponential curves. When you hear about that, you might be paralyzed and think, well, why act if in whatever we do there is a technology? Whatever we say, the research phase, whether you talk about AI or other sciences, is a long-term process. This morning we talked about the long term, and if you look at the DARPA, things are made over the long term with the right balance between the right balance of mindset of American entrepreneurs that must help us see the future, and at the same time, programs, driverless cars started in 2004. Teams did not decide one morning that they would produce ChatGPT. They'd been working on it for decades. So, second thing, we must act in order to have a plural approach, integrating several dimensions. There is something that seems to be underestimated in France, whether you talk about industrial or public research. I'm talking about communication. If you sit several people around a table, IT people, engineers, whatever, compliance people, you have conflicts. We must learn to talk together. And for that, there are most interesting initiatives, for example, NGOs in the US that are combining civil society and companies and asking themselves how we can communicate, what taxonomy, what vocabulary we can use to communicate, not in our small ecosystem, but when we try to talk to public decision makers or civil society in general. Very quickly, Victor, because we are pressed by time. Well, to conclude, I will just say that the last variable I wanted to mention is that of training within companies. And when you want to support automation, there's an essential role of social partners, not only to support training, but to offer a training that is appropriate. Thank you, Victor. Well, we'll come back to the various elements you mentioned. Ava, let me turn to you. You're an international reporter. You're going places where hope is difficult to have. You've been to Afghanistan. You're Iranian. You're not allowed to go to Iran, but you follow what's happening there with a lot of passion, I guess, and a lot of commitment. In those places where hope is such a difficult thing, how is it that despite everything, people still hope in these places? It's true that it's very difficult when you're a journalist and you are supposed to talk about trains that come in late, to summarize things in this way. It's difficult to maintain hope and to make sure that our readers do not want to just throw the magazine away. If I think of Afghanistan or Iran, where whether I'm Iranian or not, journalists can't go to Iran these days. It's forbidden. So in those places, there is a lot of energy, a lot of initiatives that being of low noise initiatives that are being carried out as concerns Afghanistan, for example. And in Iran, there is a cultural revolution ongoing today. And this is fed into by the desire to maintain the rights that we tend to forget a bit. François, you said some words at the beginning, and these words are words that Iranian people who are following the social media consider as very important. This helps them a lot. So when we show our that we're upset. It may sound somewhat cosmetic for some, but I can tell you that when I talk to Iraqi people, to Turkish people, the words of hope that we can give them are extremely important to them. Now, to talk about hope that is difficult to keep in these countries where women have so little rights, the situation is such for them that they feel that if they don't fight, there is no future for them. And if they can take antidepressant, well, the only thing they can do is fight at whatever price. If you look at the pictures from Tehran this morning, you have women who go shopping without a veil, who go shopping with showing their hair, and they're risking their life doing that. By throwing this garment at the risk of their life, for them, this is essential, an essential goal. Even if the aim, in view of the highly conservative regime, they do not want to go back in time. They prefer to pay the price of that. And what they're asking us is to relay and to convey their fight, as we can't go there. For them, it's absolutely essential and fundamental that we should convey their energy, whether in France and abroad. It's important to remind people that this is the first feminist revolution in the world that is really being covered by the Western media. So it's extremely important to continue conveying the message. And behind that, there's probably hope for us. It's essential to remember that all the rights we consider as granted are not granted. We have to fight for them. Just look back at history. We did not have these rights some decades ago, even in France. And it's important to exert these rights as women and men. I heard that there might be some problems with the Copé-Zimmermann law or the Sovadem law, the quota policies, but all these rights have enabled us to improve the situation of gender equality. And it's essential that we should continue fighting in France as well to reach the goals and convey the initiatives. There's a lot of them, whether in France or elsewhere. If we talk about clandestine schools that are built secretly in Afghan cellars, or in Iran, women going shopping unveiled to promote their rights. Thank you. Thank you. As we listen to you, we understand the expression which is called the energy of despair. We understand that the energy of despair is almost hope. Melody, let me turn to you. You're in the Netherlands. You're a young activist in terms of climate. The question I feel like asking you is the following. The traditional levers that climate activists use to mobilize us is to frighten us, showing us the curves, showing us the indisputable evolution of climate change in order to lead us to change our behavior. But when you use fear, it's efficient, it's true, but can you at the same time give people hope? Did you hear the question?
Sorry, I don't know if that was addressed to me or not.
Yes, it was. It was.
Could you repeat?
My question was the following. How can you give people hope in terms of climate when we know that the indicators are deteriorating and that to correct all that we would need considerable efforts?
I'm really grateful to be here, and I think it's such an important topic and question to ask. We're living in a world where there's so much happening, good and bad, it can feel overwhelming. I started my journey at 12 years old, and perhaps that's maybe also the secret of what allowed me and my sister to take action, because when you are 12 years old, my sister was 10, the sky is not even the limit. We only think in hope. We only think in what is possible. And I think using that ability and playing with imagination, we are able to invite people to be part of this movement. I think, as you said, ruling or leading with fear keeps us stuck. And that's the last thing we need. We need to be able to accelerate the change that we know is possible. But we can't get there if we cannot imagine it. So I think being hopeful in this movement is one of the most important ingredients. And I'm from a generation that is grounded in hope. So I think it's really leading by example with a narrative and a communication that is open and inviting. We know that the science is telling us that we cannot continue as business as usual. We need that change, and that change has to happen now. But there isn't one way to create change, and this is what gets me so excited also to hear from the other speakers and their incredible ways of creating change. This is important because we need everybody in this movement. Are you a journalist? Are you a technology expert? Are you a teacher, a professor, a farmer? We need the skills of everybody in this movement. And I think that this is an empowering narrative so that people don't feel stuck. People don't sit in the fear, but they acknowledge their unique skill set and contribute that to the movement. So I think that's how we remain hopeful, by celebrating everybody's ability to be part of this change.
Thank you, Melati, for this inspiring message. Fatih, je me tourne vers vous maintenant. C'est vrai qu'en France, on a connu...
Fatih, there were some riots last week. So terrifying days, tragic days, dramatic days. So today, how can we bring back hope in those neighborhoods and districts that have been bashed? So what kind of hope can we give to these people? So you are committed to cultural action in cities as part of the 2024 Olympic Games. What is your take on that? So good afternoon to all of you. I thank you, Françoise and François. So, of course, I mean, we do relate to what has happened recently. We don't have a solution. You can't get a solution overnight. With the health crisis, we hoped that we could get an answer overnight. So I was born in Gardanne, a city between Aix and Marseille. I grew up in a very hostile environment. So I was on the streets and I discovered urban cultures. Urban cultures are part and parcel of the intangible and moral heritage. And breakdance is part and parcel of the Olympic Games now. So without hip-hop culture, oh, thanks a lot, by the way, for your round of applause. Without hip-hop culture and without urban cultures, neither ever would have been able to discover Camus, Musset, Rousseau, Descartes. And people were hostile to me. So I went to the United States for the first time a few years ago. If we can dance together, we can live together. And of course, we need to take into account our cultural and sporting activities. We got a label from 2024 Olympics. So within the public authorities, we need to take into account the city policy, but that's not enough. So I'm just talking about my own experience. So we need to put culture, sports at the center. Genius doesn't come the street, but genius appears when you are supported and helped and backed. So for me, so I represented my region. Something was something unprecedented. So education should be based on democratic values, patriotism, and Republican values. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Fatih. As part of your career path, can you tell me if somebody helped you to be hopeful? Was there a kind of a tipping point to be the world champion with citizenship awareness, and you spend a lot of time with people? Was there a turning point? I met an instructor, and I'm in favor of the military service, not the old one. But it's important, I mean, to focus on sports and culture. We have manual intelligence. I remember this instructor that I met and we practiced in the streets. and he was 50 years of age. He told me, what do you do? And I told him, break dance. So what does it require, break dance? Resilience? Yes, so go on, go ahead. And resilience is deeply rooted into my mind, and that's why I decided to tour the world. Okay, continue along that path. So, Victor, you talked about the social issue with AI. So less productive people will become more productive. It shouldn't be a technology that will widen up the cultural and social gap. Can we believe in that? Yes, of course. But we need to support change. Society needs changes through climate transition, social changes, helping women throughout the world. Technology won't replace the decision-making process, political decision-making process. What is important is to roll out technologies. It's a highly political issue. It's a matter of politics. And of course, it's a collective effort. It's a collective endeavor. This is something that is of critical importance. Liberal democracy need convergence, of course, regarding regulations, regarding rules, good practices when it comes to deploying artificial intelligence. By the way, artificial intelligence can be used in order to beef up efficiency, efficacy of resources, to further climate transition, but it can be used for fast fashion. So we need to lay out a framework, a shared common framework between Europe and the United States. In order to do that, we need to reduce the imbalances in the way we are provided information. So we can see that companies would like to get a common framework, and they won't be able to survive if the differences are too big across the different markets. And I think that this is a significant point. We need to get a consensus on the big principles that will be materialized, taking into account technological elements. There should be an alliance between liberal democracies. Ada, you wanted to add something. So I would like to ask the same question as Fatih. So you are committed, a commitment-based adventure. Of course, I mean, you've testified for the cause of women. What was the triggering point? Why did you embark upon this path? I discovered the existence of social security in Chile. My mother is from Chile and my father is Iranian, so I discovered what was social security because I got surgery for appendicitis, and you have to give a blank check, and didn't know why it was the case because I was born in France, and over time in France I realized that you could enjoy schools, free libraries, hospitals in most countries in the world. That's not the case. I mean, it doesn't work like that in many countries of the world. And of course, I mean, I became aware that I'm living in an outstanding place, and I wanted to tell what was happening in the world and a situation that was not good. But when you compare yourself, I mean, you feel more optimistic, and then you can contribute to improving the situation. And that's why I decided to do this job, and I decided to do this job in conflict areas and zones. You have terrible conflicts, and from time to time it's a matter of life or death. When I returned to France, I'm very happy, whatever the situation is. I'm very happy because I was born in a republic, and I'm very happy because I live in a liberal democracy. Maybe some questions for our speakers. Somebody has raised his hand at the back of a room. Maybe there are some roving mics. Gentlemen, go ahead. Is it possible for you to introduce yourself? And maybe you can ask a brief question. You need to get a mic. So speak into the mic, please. Thank you, Marion. So, hi. I'm part of the youth delegation, and I created an association called Melting Pot, promoting education in popular districts and neighborhoods. I come from Marseille, and I think that you can notice that through my accent. I have a question to put to you. According to you, what is the role of popular education in terms of people's education, young education? We are talking about schools, but it's a threefold approach. Education, parents, and experience. And most of the time, experience is left aside. People cannot really experiment. So I want to know what is your take on that. A question for Fatih or for Victor as well. So in a nutshell, I will give you a short answer. Regarding diversity and training talent, different talent for technology, this is absolutely pivotal. This is not wishful thinking. I can tell you a story. When I arrived at Stanford at the end of the curriculum, we worked on projects with friends from China, from India, and as far as I'm concerned, I started to think with theories, and I thought about the model that could be used. And my colleagues, looked at the data in order to explore the environment. There are different approaches in industry, in research. When you have a good team spirit, you can find new things. So for France, it's important to train people, to train a wide array of talent at all levels, PhD, masters, BAs. So, Fatih, what can you tell us? We have a question by Mrs. Moreno. So, popular cultures within education. People should be made accountable. Parents should be made accountable. You have cultural and demographic segregation. But we need to focus on the role of parents. I was fortunate to travel thanks to urban cultures. I went to the favelas of Brazil, and I didn't see young people loot schools. And they decided to take ownership of their districts and neighborhoods despite dire straits and conditions. So to make people accountable, and a young guy, who is in favor of the military service, we don't have too many young people such him. Thanks a lot for your words of hope. Of course, I'm very happy with the panel of speakers. So we've just gone through terrible moments in my country, and I'm really flabbergasted. So what do you think of these events, and what are the words of hope? We would like to get country that is less divided. We need to look at the people who provide hopes. It's not simply a matter of passing judgment of the people who have looted lots of places. What about these events? What is your perception, and what are the words of hope that we can give to people? Of course, as the minister said, we were all flabbergasted. diversity is a huge opportunity. Any euro invested in education is a euro which is well invested in the long term. Of course, so we should refuse status quo, and we need to focus on the future. As far as I'm concerned, I was in Nanterre. I was a reporter. Convergence of fears, this is what I've observed. The fear of parents, whatever their origins. So people being afraid of being arrested by police forces, scared by people who looted some infrastructures, and the fear of the police forces, law enforcement forces. The police forces are afraid of controlling people, and the situation will turn awry, and they are afraid of being involved in a situation that could put their career in jeopardy, bringing about some irreparable damage. So lots of fears being concentrated on the same territory. So there should be more bonds, more links between people. It might seem gullible and naive. I don't want to politicize the debate. And local police forces have been removed. And in fact, the links are looser now between the population and the police forces. Françoise, I was not surprised. But what about values? I talked about the school system. So basically we've halved the size of classrooms, but that's not enough. President, we need to make some efforts. When you teach values to young people at a very young age, it has a lasting impact. Fatih, we need to take into account the context. So did you expect, this explosion of violence? Were you surprised? Yes, I was surprised, especially in France, in a country such as ours. In other countries, the environment, the context is more hostile, and they didn't face these problems. We are the country of enlightenment, so we don't want the power to be cut. So when we talk about delinquency, we are talking about young people who drop out, and they have substitutive or substitution families, hence some violence. Of course, we have to invest. You talked about education. Education is key. We don't invest in programs because when we don't invest for the future, we will pay the price later. Back to basics, in fact. So we need to focus on the school system. We need to understand young people, taking into account their social and individual context. So back to basics. So freedom, equality, fraternity. Thank you.
Monsieur, vous aviez une question. Il vous faudrait un micro.
You have a question. Do you want a mic? Can you introduce yourself? You can ask a brief question. Fred, I'm an acoustics vibration engineer, so I work at Airbus on the Super Puma, and I came to Marseille to work there, but it didn't last long. Why? Over the past 10 years, I was in custody in Paris. So I was put in custody in Marseille by the special police forces. I'm working in the UK. Oh, I have to ask a question, but I wanted to introduce myself. So I didn't want to leave Marseille. The question, please. So back to this idea. Rap. If we want young people from the suburbs, it's not a question. Oh, I don't have any question, just a comment. Thanks a lot for contributing. There are some people who are eager to ask questions. A question in the first row. So 2 questions in a row, then we will be able to answer, and we will give a collective answer. I am a French person living in Las Vegas. You talked about the Iranian regime. You've said that it's a conservative regime. And for me, it's a fascist type of regime. It's a terrorist regime. What can we do practically in order to help out women and to help Iranians who are the heroes of freedom? What can we do? So let's listen to the second question that has been asked. Ronald Parade. I live in France in the sustainable development sector, working on earth, raw earth. So there are lots of hopes. So following these hopes that have been expressed, will there be an action plan? You will be given an answer in 10 minutes' time. So the best is yet to come. Jean-Hervé Lorenzi is a global breakdance dancer and is also the author of the manifesto. So you can give him an answer.
Question, est-ce qu'on peut faire à échelle 1?
Well, there's 2 things to answer your question. First of all, individually, we must continue relaying this revolution, conveying it with the scope it deserves. Let me remind you once again that this is the first feminist revolution in history, which is borne by both men and women. So as media, we have a lot to do. But as citizens, it's absolutely essential to continue contributing on social media in all ways we can. And at a more political level, the main demand of Iranian opponents is that anyone taking part in this regime that you aptly described as a terrorist and fascist regime should be forbidden to come to a European country. It's something complicated. France can't make that decision on its own. It's a decision that has to be made at the European level, at the EU level, but it's very important because we're talking about mullahs who are used to coming to the EU, to enjoying the spirits that they forbid the youngsters to drink in their country, and they will hang them for that. And they come with their wives, members of the family, and wearing garments that would lead to a condemnation in their countries. And it's important to pinpoint this paradox and this situation, which is unbearable for Iranian people who can't go out. So the main thing would be to forbid for the members of this regime to come and enjoy the European Union countries. One last question, and we'll listen to Françoise then for conclusion. Marion, there's a question in the first row. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm the mayor of Châteauneuf-le-Rouge, Michel Boulan. I used to be assistant for sports of this area. So, Fatih, this is a question to you. With the mayors of Aix-en-Provence, we have created a system called PRODAS. It's high-level sports coming to the neighborhoods. We talked about school and culture, but we have to talk about sports. And I would like to know your opinion about this type of policy. Gardanne, Pertuis, Aix-en-Provence, Vitrolles were also involved. The city of Marseille wants to introduce this action. What is your opinion on this policy of partnership with high-level sports club? We fund these clubs, we help them so that they come to the neighborhoods and maybe lead to some new vocations. Fatih, Well, I know well the municipal context of Aix because Mrs. Joissin has asked me to participate for 2 years, and I've known this place for over 20 years. I've also started working in Marseille as well. Prodas is in Marseille. I benefited from it. I believe that associative policies or associations are really have this type of actions, and I would be in favor of that. I encourage these initiatives. I believe that central policies, including the state, should be supported by the local elected authorities. This is very important because there are answers that cannot be given centrally to the local areas. It has to be bilateral, and I support and encourage this type of action. We did that in our sector of breakdance with the first federal finals in the Grand Théâtre de Provence. Breakdance started at the end of the 70s in the Bronx, and now it's in the Olympic Games, so we can do that. Thank you for the message. Well, this is the conclusion. Françoise, over to you. Well, thank you, François. It won't be long because we were promised we'd have a surprise and would like to give time for this surprise. I'd like to pick up a quote without changing the words. Ernst Bloch said, "Hope is not a belief, it's what makes us get ahead." Thank you all. In a moment, Jean Hervé is going to get up on stage to present the manifesto, but in a moment.